little lady whispered to the lady next to her, "Oh, my God, she's going to read her talk." Now, I want you to know and relax, because in this little book, I have a piece of paper, and it says, "Your name is Willie, and you're an alcoholic." Because by the time you get up here and look down there at all those eyeballs, you aren't quite sure. I haven't found it fitting necessary to have a drink of alcohol since June the 19th, 1957. And for that, I am so grateful. I owe that to you and to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love us Texans because we do give our sobriety dates, because it's the only track record we have. I'm telling you when I tell you that for 26 years, this program, this beautiful God-given program that we have, that's in between the pages of this book, has kept this old gal sober. And not only sober, because I'm going to tell you about the rest that he's kept me. Basically, I have two jobs up here. I need to tell you a little bit about Willie. And there's a new gal out here. She came last night, and she was introduced to me and said she was brand new. And I'm sorry about the rest of these folks out here, but that's the gal I'm talking to this morning. And it's important for her to know a little bit about Willie as a human being before alcohol got a hold of me. And it's real important to her to know what Alcoholics Anonymous has done for me in those years. You know, being an alcoholic nowadays is sort of a status symbol, isn't it? Lord, we're almost having to work to keep out the social climate. Now, this is good. This is good news, bad news. I like, you turn on the television and they're talking about us on one of their talk shows. And you open up a magazine and you read about alcoholics and alcoholism. And that's good. They even have articles in the Sunday supplement about us. And that's good. And I'm glad that we're getting all of these fine things said and written about us. But I read some of them, and I listen to some of these people talking about alcoholics and alcoholism, and I don't know who they're talking about. Because they seem to want to say, an alcoholic is, and then they go on and explain us. Now, have you ever seen anything that an alcoholic is? I love old Wino Joe when he says, the only thing consistent about an alcoholic is his inconsistency. Wino says you take an old drunk and let him walk by your house every morning at 8 o'clock for 9 years. And one morning you get all ready and you're going to go out and speak to him. And hell, he won't come. Now, I wish they knew that about us when they talked about us and described us and defined us. I think if we ever come up with a definition of Alcoholics Anonymous, we might lose it. Because it's all these things, as many people as we have out here this morning and out there in this beautiful world of ours. This program was written, I don't know how, but in this book, it's written for each and every one of us. How many of y'all came in here in a bunch? Somehow or another, with God's hand, this book was written for each and every one of us as individuals. And that's why we're up here this weekend. We're not up here to do anything except to share what we're supposed to share with you. And hope and pray to God that just one person out there, I'm just talking to that one girl this morning, and of course I pray that there are other girls out there, other women that are new to this program, or that maybe aren't new, but that are struggling and trying to deal with this thing called life. Sober. And one day at a time. And they're finding it a hell of a big job. and maybe a job that they're not getting everything they can out of this program. I was born and raised in a little town called Spring. And very few people out there know where Spring is. And I always have to go into great detail about where Spring is because I always get it mixed up with Spring Branch, Big Springs, and Sweet Springs, and all the other springs we have in Texas. But I'm just from plain old Spring. Now, it's north of Houston. Now, they're moving out on us, but we, and they refer to us as the bedroom community out there. But we were there before they were. So Spring is an old town. It's a little German farming community. And back in the days when I was growing up there, it was a small Texas town. It was so small we didn't even have a village idiot. We just all took turns. And a lot of you folks, you got a lot of little small towns left down here, so you know what I'm talking about. But I need to tell you a little bit about Willie growing up there, because, see, some of these definitions, they define us, well, it used to be back, as I was talking last night, it used to be back, from the cradle, we started having problems. Hell, now they have us prenatal. I mean, we have these character defects before we ever get here. But in Spring, I grew up there in this little old German farming community. Everybody in town kissing kin. Everybody on the same economic level, the same religious background, because we just had one church. And this was a quiet little German town. And about the most exciting thing that ever happened in Spring, Texas, when I was growing up, was the church picnic. Now, when you said that, you about covered all my trauma. They want us to be people that are full of fear and insecurity and all of this from the time we were small children. And see, there's some of us that just won't fit. Some of the people want us, and these are mostly lay people that are writing about us. They want us to sort of fit in these little holes like in an egg carton, and they want to stick us there and fit us into this mold. And by George, there's just some of us won't stay put, will we? And I'm going to talk about this because it was one of my big stumbling blocks, and if it's one of yours, maybe this will help. I didn't hate my mother. I didn't hate my father. I didn't hate my brother, and he didn't hate me. I got along real well with the folks in Spring. Didn't know I wasn't supposed to. We just went along, working the land, and just nothing happened. Now, I tried to convince a psychologist later on in my life that the reason I was an alcoholic was because I had such a boring childhood. Because, see, he wanted me to have all this deep trauma, and I just couldn't stir it up. There isn't very much deep traumas in church picnics. I graduated from high school in a huge class of 5. We started out with 7, had 2 dropouts. There wasn't a great amount of competition and all of that sort of thing, so I didn't feel inadequate. Didn't even know what that word meant back then. I didn't feel insecure. I didn't feel uncomfortable. We did have barn dances and things like this, and I loved to dance. And so as far as looking back there, when they try to get back there and look at all of us, a very wise man told me in AA one time, he said, Willie, in so many instances, and there's a whole bunch of us folks all over, and in so many instances, honey, the personality of the person does bring on the alcoholism. But in just as many instances, the alcoholism brings on the personality. We are not rubber stamped. And what I want to put over mainly this morning is the fact that, honey, don't try to envelop yourself with a blanket and say, I have to be this way. This is why we're up here, and we're all giving you we're giving you us. And that's a hard job. But we're throwing off the blanket so that you won't think that you have to fit into a certain mold. You look at you, as the program asks you to do, as a separate human being. And see, I wanted so desperately to not be one of y'all. I just didn't want to be an alcoholic. Did any of y'all grow up, as children, thing I want in life most is to grow up and be an alcoholic. So I fought you with everything I had, and one of the things I fought you with was the blanket. Because that I threw over myself. And when I went to my first meetings, I listened to the people with different stories from mine. And I picked up that difference because I wanted so badly to be unique. And I didn't see the pain in your eyes, and I didn't hear the pain when you talked about your active alcoholism. I listened to the things that had happened to you. And the things that had happened were mainly coming from men in those days because we didn't have a lot of women in AA. And I listened to your jail stories and your hospital stories and all this, and I could not identify. So, sugar, if this is what you're doing, if maybe you're sitting in meetings and saying, this hadn't happened to me, listen. I graduated from high school and went off to college. Graduated in 1944 from college, and I came back to Spring, Texas. Now, of course, as I look back, I can make up, and I can see that maybe a little signpost along the way, but I really have to dig to do that. But one of the little signposts, I guess, is I went off and I heard these girls talking about doing things in high school and as they grew up that we didn't do at the church picnic. And God, it sounded like fun. And I wanted me some of that. But I don't know of any young person growing up that doesn't see that grass that looks greener on the other side. Especially if you're just a little old barefoot ignorant country girl. And you go off and you listen to the girls from big cities, like Dallas and Fort Worth. I mean, they lived in Dallas. And they did all these things that those people up there in Dallas do. And I wanted me some of that. I wanted some of the glamour and the things that I saw on that pretty silver screen and in the magazines. But I came back to Spring with some pretty grandiose ideas. And I informed my father, my good old German papa, that I was going to New York and be a model. Well, now, Papa, he didn't know exactly what a model was. But he had just enough of an idea to say, no, that's not what you're going to do. And now remember, this is 1944. And teenagers didn't argue with Papa in 1944. And I said, yes, sir, what did you have in mind? And he said, I want you to go into Houston. Your brother's off fighting the war, and I want you to go into Houston. And I want you to find something to do for the war effort. Oh, well, hell. I knew lots of things I could do for the war effort. But it wasn't any of this Pop had in mind. So he said, you going into Houston, you going to get you a job teaching school. And I thought, dear God, I never saw a school teacher in my life look like she had 1 minute's fun. Not the ones we had back in Spring, Texas. But I went on in, and now see, some of these articles and some of these talkers about us, they point their fingers and they say, you know, you've never been fulfilled. Alcoholics are people that have never really got to do in life what they wanted to do. Hell, I hadn't been in that classroom 6 weeks till I knew that this is the only way I ever wanted to make a living. And when I retired from the public schools, couple of years ago, I had finished 35 years with America's Teenagers. I heard a little lady say, "My God, that's why she drinks." If you have one of those people called teenagers, you hang in there, because they're great. I loved everything about teaching. You hang in there with those kids, they'll make it. If you're doing what you ought to do, they'll make it. They are great. And I loved everything about the teaching profession. After I retired from the public schools, I wasn't kicked around a couple of years and wasn't satisfied. I had this antsy feeling, so I'm teaching now in a college. And I've really enjoyed being back in that classroom. And I guess they're going to have to tote me out feet first. So see, we can't look there. For me, I couldn't look there and say I had never been fulfilled in what I wanted to do, because I'm still doing it. Okay? Texas does have some funny laws. Y'all know we have some funny laws, and they passed one about that time. I had been teaching there in Houston for 4 years, and they passed a law that said that if you didn't have practice teaching, you couldn't get a contract for the next year. So after teaching 4 years, I had to go back to school and take practice teaching. That good old Texas law. Even some of you folks from Louisiana have funny laws. Well, I had to go back to college and take practice teaching because I hadn't prepared, remember, to be a teacher. And I picked a little university up in the center of the state in San Marcos, Texas, that gave practice teaching during the summer. And about this time in my talk, I can see the expression on your face of some of you folks sitting out there saying to yourself, now, okay, we got her grown, we got her out of college, we got her teaching for 4 years. I wonder if she ever did any drinking. Or whether I stayed in that one room and somebody squirted it to me through the keyhole. No. Here's where the plot thickens up a little bit. I met and married a fella that you're not going to know, because I really don't know, but I'm still married to that dude. And he was a United States Air Force officer, a pilot and a flyboy, and oh my. He moved this little old country girl into a world that I had just read about and seen up there on that screen. He was stationed up at Scottsfield, Illinois, right across the river from St. Louis, and Lord, I thought I had died and gone straight to heaven. Of course, I had had home brew back in Spring, Texas. You can't find any little old German farming community that doesn't, everybody doesn't make good home brew. And see, the minister didn't come down in that good German Lutheran church. He didn't come down every Sunday morning on drinking and the evils of drink, and didn't make it a moral thing with us, because he made good home brew. And of course I had some. And if you won't look for signposts along the way, I can look back and realize that I've never been a sipper. I don't sip anything liquid. If you hand it to me, I think it's made for drinking, and that's what I do with it. So I was never a sipper, and I'd, chug a lot of that beer, and was proud, real proud of the fact that I could drink that home brew and just nothing really happened. It just sort of gave me that, that real, like teenagers say now, that cool feeling. It just made me feel good, and that's all. It was a part of my heritage and a part of my growing up. But this man takes me up there and introduces me to the first time to all these little cocktail bars and lounges. Where the smoke's so thick you can't cut it with a knife, and a little combo sitting over in the corner, and all these pretty fancy little drinks in these pretty glasses. Take an old glass of home brew, and there's nothing, really very glamorous about that. But you put a martini out there in that long stem glass, and with that olive sitting down there. And it was, honey, you're going to hear a lot of folks that are going to tell you, and they're telling you the truth, that say, that they drank alcohol strictly for the effect, and they hated the taste of it. I want to tell you something. I liked everything that man handed me. I had never had any gin, I had never had scotch, I had never had all that good, and I loved everything he handed me. I loved the taste of it, and I loved what it did for me, and really I don't know what it did other than just relax me. I had a tremendous capacity. You're going to hear that a lot from people. But my husband said that was one of the reasons he married me in the first place, because I could drink him under the table. And he knew I'd make a good Air Force wife. Because, see, in the service, you do a little drinking. Don't stop. And almost everybody does a little drinking. A little every day. And parties at the club and all this kind of thing. So I moved into a beautiful, glamorous, as far as I was concerned, world. And I loved everything about it. I loved getting all dressed up and going to the officers' club, and I loved all the cocktail parties and the general's receptions, and no problem. We had a ball for the first 2 years, and then they picked my man up and sent him to Korea. And okay, I went back to Spring, Texas, and I got me a job this time teaching there in Spring and living with my mother and father. And looking at signposts, I guess we can point back here, and yes, I did do my first lone drinking while he was in Korea for 18 months. My husband is of the disposition that if he is in Korea and I am in Spring, Texas, I better be drinking alone. I better be doing everything alone. So, see, I did some lone drinking while he was gone. When I'd write his letters at night, I'd have a drink there beside me, and this, you know, one of the questions on so many of these questionnaires. Oh, we're getting a lot of questionnaires. Lord. But one of the questions is, you know, did you ever drink alone? Circumstances, hell yeah, a lot of us drink alone. No big traumatic thing happened. I taught school the whole time he was gone. I never did go to work drunk. None of these things. He got back. And as I realize now, the small blackouts had started. And see, if we could just wake up some morning and our whole world was gone immediately, it would be an entirely different story with a lot of us. But alcoholism is a very insidious, chipping disease. It takes away a piece of us at a time, and it doesn't happen just all of a sudden. The blackouts that I was experiencing weren't any big deal. They didn't even worry me in the beginning, because it was just a little snatch of a conversation here, or maybe a telephone call that I didn't remember the time they had given me, or going out with a bunch of the folks there and with my brother and his wife and going to a dance and really not, remembering the last part of the dance, but very small lapses of time, no great big deal. And maybe that's the way it happened to you. If it had dropped on me like a bomb, maybe I would have realized, something's happening, but it didn't do this. And being in a drinking world, when he came back, we picked up right where we had left off with the partying and the good times. And we were in a drinking world. It wasn't anything real out of the ordinary to not remember how you got home. You see somebody in the BX the next morning, and they'd say, oh my God, that was a good party last night. What time did y'all get home? I have no idea when I got home or if I got home. This was sort of a point of pride, was the fact that, we were all heavy, two-fisted drinkers. And not remembering the end of a party just wasn't that big a deal in the world that I lived in. But things began to happen. Now, in the beginning, we call these strange things, my husband and I. Strange things began to happen with Willie. And the blackouts got longer. And the things that you hear people talk about, the embarrassing moments, begin to take over my life, I don't have to really stand up here and give you blow by blow of what happened to Willie. Because every woman alcoholic sitting out here this morning knows what happened to Willie. I love you men, and you loved me sober. But there is nothing more humiliating and degrading than to be a woman alcoholic. I don't think women's lives are going to change that. You know, you never see a cartoon about a woman drunk. You fellas can, get all balled up and you can put a lampshade on your head and you can get up on the table and dance, and you just funnier than a crutch. I'm not taking anything away from your pain. But if you see an old drunk fella walking, staggering down a sidewalk on one side of the street, and you see the woman staggering down the other side of the street, two different pictures appear in your mind. Because the people look over there at this old staggering man drunk, and they'll, he's just funny, his hat's falling off, and he's putting it back on, and he's just, there is something, and this doesn't take away from your pain. But you look over on the other side of the street, and the only thing that comes to your mind is, isn't she pitiful? God, I don't ever want that word again applied to me. Every woman alcoholic knows that feeling of degradation that goes with being a woman alcoholic. And it's not easy for me to stand here and look you in the face and say, because you know all of those things. So many things a man is excused for, and I'm not quarreling with that. That's just the way things are. But we begin to live in this humiliation, and it tears us apart as women. So I don't have to go into all the details, but things begin to happen. And we did what so many of you will follow right along. We thought there must be something wrong with Willie physically, because these strange things weren't necessarily that I was getting sick or having bad hangovers, but I was beginning to turn into a different person. And this is a complication. My husband, in looking back now together, he'll say, it was such a subtle thing. But your whole personality was beginning to change in little ways. I had never been a liar. I had never been a cheat. I had never been a rationalizer. I had had no reason to be these things. I had never been a big excuse maker. I had never had anything in my life to make excuses about. But hell, I was getting good at it. Because you begin to try to explain away these strange things that happened, not only to other people as much as you do to yourself. So I was becoming a rationalizer and an excuse maker and a liar. And as you know, the more we practice, the better we get at it. We walk around with answers to questions that people hadn't even asked us yet. Because this is the only protection we have, is to try to understand and tell ourselves, why did you do this? And alcohol just simply never entered our minds. It was these things that were happening to Willie that we first got worried about. All right, I go to the medical man. He examines me, gives me all these tests and everything, and he calls my husband in, and he tells me, my Lord, he's healthy as a horse. I was in my 20s, and thank God I'm still healthy. But do you know, see, the insanity had started because I wanted this man to find something physically wrong with me. Right now, standing before you this morning, I don't even like to have a headache. I resent having a headache. I don't want to feel bad anywhere. But I wanted this man to find something physically wrong with me. So see, the sickness and insanity started there. The soul sickness wasn't there yet, but the insanity was beginning. Because my God, how we value our health. But I wanted him to tell me, your liver is malfunctioning. You have gallbladder problems. I don't want anything wrong with my liver and my gallbladder now. But I was disappointed that he couldn't say, this is why you're changing, or this is your problem, and give us, my husband and I, the answer to these subtle changes that were taking place. But he wouldn't do this. He asked me, about my drinking and the history they always take. And I said, I don't drink any more than anybody else. And see, that was the truth. Because I was living with drinking people. Salesmen face this all the time. A lot of you fellows that travel and are in sales. So I didn't lie to the man. And so we just went right over it. But he did tell my husband, said she does seem to be a little bit nervous. And maybe if she drank a little glass of wine before her dinner, this would help her with the nervousness. Her digestion maybe would be better. So I followed directions. And God bless him, he didn't say what size that wine glass had to be. So I followed directions. We rocked along a little while, and these things and this personality change became more in the forefront. So we haul Willie off, There must, if there's not anything wrong with you physically, there must be something wrong with you mentally. Now, talk about insanity. And see, when we see that word, when I saw it when I first came into the program, I wanted insanity. The whole bit. I wanted the flaps or something like that. Up against the wall. That's the kind of insanity I immediately latched on to when you use that word with me. But I went to this psychologist. And see, we couldn't find anything back there to blame this strange change of personality on. So hell, I made up stuff for the man. He was working hard to try to, get me back there where I started all this trauma, prenatal. And he wanted my home life to be, just all traumatic and everything. So I figured, well, shoot, by then I had become, if you wanted something from me and you let me know what you wanted, then that's what I do. Because, see, there was something wrong in my life. So I began, for the first time in my life, to try to do what you wanted me to do. Instead of doing the natural thing that I had done all my life and just being Willie. And the thing that you've convinced me is what I need to be. Just Willie. That's all. That's the very best that I can be. But I'd lost that. So I told him stuff. Oh, I had my mother and daddy in such a mess. You never saw anything to be. My feelings about my brother. Oh, they got deep. And my stories got bigger and bigger and bigger. Now, the only thing wrong with that, this was the days before tape recorders. Days you don't remember, darling. And that psychiatrist would be sitting there, and he'd be behind that couch, and he'd be taking notes. And see, that hour would be up, and he'd get me out of there, and I'd come back a week later, and he'd open up my file, see, and he'd have his notes. And hell, when you're telling a lie, you give a week, and I wouldn't know where I was in the story. And he broke the cardinal rule that the fellow was talking about last night with the psychiatrist sitting there shaking his head. Mm-hmm. He broke a cardinal rule. He said, but last week you said, because bless his heart, I was the first alcoholic he ever fooled with. I don't know whether he's still in business or not. But I upset that man. And he talked to my husband. They always talk to my husband. Because back in those days, women didn't have sense anyhow, so talk to the man. But the psychologist asked my husband, said, are you sure she's a college graduate? I was sitting there stone cold sober telling this man these big lies, and he couldn't figure out why. And see, I couldn't either. So the sinkhole got deeper, and I got deeper into it. And I began to live in a world of self-deception. I had to relieve some of the pain. And things began to pile up in my life. And the pain began to grow. Okay, we rocked along and things got worse. You're never going to hear anybody get to this point in their story. And suddenly they're going to announce from up here, from then on, things got better. No. After you start noticing the symptoms of your alcoholism, things don't get worse. And things got worse. And we went to the only other place that we knew to go to. And I figured, and we talked about it. Oh, God, do you remember those talks that you used to have? Long and serious talks with your spouse on, why did you do that? And it never once occurred to us, living in this world of alcoholism, or alcohol, that it was the alcohol that was causing the problem. And it was taking Willie together apart in little pieces and throwing her everywhere. The alcohol. We looked for things and circumstances. And when the other two didn't work, I thought, well, I had grown up pretty strict in that German Lutheran church. You don't just walk down the aisle some Sunday morning and join the church like a lot of other churches. We studied 2 long years of catechism. And then they stand us up on Palm Sunday and ask us a bunch of questions, and we better know the answers. Because if we don't get to join the church. We have to go back and study a little more. See, I knew when I talked to this minister, I knew that I knew a lot about God. And the minister realized, when I talked to him, that I knew a lot about God. It took you people in Alcoholics Anonymous in this book to teach me to know God. And there is a world of difference, isn't there? I knew a lot about God. But I didn't know God as I know Him now, and that you helped me to know. That you've given me. So I talked to this man, and we didn't find any lack there, and I wanted it to be. I wanted an answer. So what was happening to Willie? To make it worse, I was a periodic. Oh, dear Lord. When I get a call from intergroup now, I always ask her, did you find out whether she's a periodic or a daily drinker? For God, don't you hate to fool with a periodic? Or if you happen to be one, isn't it a mess? We're not supposed to envy, but I really envied you folks that drank every day. Because at least you knew every day what you was going to do. Us old periodics, we go along and we get into a little problem, and the husband or the wife gets on our back, so we don't drink. We can let it alone for any given length of time, whatever turns y'all on, we can just... And then my poor old husband would walk in, and there I'd be, stoned. After 2 or 3 months of everything just going along fine. And he'd say, my God, what happened? I didn't have the remotest idea. Periodics are a mess. Because all that time I thought I was controlling it, see? Shoot, it wasn't alcohol that was the problem. No big deal. I would, quit drinking because I had humiliated myself or him, or embarrassed myself or him. Because, see, these things were getting worse. We talk about the miracles in Alcoholics Anonymous. We talk about the coincidences that happen with us. Sitting in an AA meeting, and don't hear the word miracle or coincidence. Oh, it was a funny thing happened about that time. Funny thing, my hind foot. Beautiful man. J.P. that lives in Mississippi now passed on a definition of what a coincidence is. And a lot of you have heard it, but a lot of you haven't, and I want to pass it on to you. It said, really, a coincidence is a small miracle in which God wishes to remain anonymous. Doesn't that fit us? Because about this time, we were stationed in Omaha, Nebraska. And my husband is a very thorough man. When he reads a newspaper, he reads a newspaper. Every single word of it. And see, by this time, I was such a completely different person. But he said that morning when he opened that Sunday paper and he was reading along, there was a little article in it, way over towards the back, about a meeting they were having there in Omaha of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it gave the preamble of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it said, if you need any further information concerning this meeting, call this number. And he said that when he looked at that article, the only word that just jumped out at him was the word alcoholic. Now here you have two intelligent, so-called educated people that it never once had occurred to us that alcohol was what was taking Willie apart, that was turning her into a liar and a rationalizer and a cheat. All the things that I had never been. But he said that word alcoholic just jumped out at him. And so he told me, he said, you know, we had another talk. I can do, and that's to try to help you right now to understand the situation and maybe see if you really think she is an alcoholic. Mary was a diplomat. And she said, I'll send you a copy of our big book. And so she sent him a copy of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now he read this book, and he closed it up, and he had his answer. And he brought this book to me, and I wouldn't touch it. Because see, it had a word on it I didn't like, and it wasn't anonymous. But another miracle in AA, one of the thousands that have happened to me, this big book, one big book, was all over my house. It was in the kitchen, it was in the bedroom, it was in the bathroom. Any place my man thought I might light for a few minutes, he put the big book, hoping, dear God, that I'd open it up and read it, because he had his answer. But things got so bad that I didn't read the book, but I consented to go. I called the number, and I consented to go to my first AA meeting there in Omaha. Oh, dear God, I was so phony by this time. I got all dressed up for you. See, being a periodic, I could, knock it off and look good again and look, my eyes cleared up. And I got all dressed up for you, and I graced you with my presence that night. And I came home, and I told my husband, I said, honey, that is the finest bunch of people I ever met in my life. But my God, they got lots of problems. Of course, it was mostly men, and they were talking about jails, and they were talking about hospitals, and they were talking about car wrecks, and they were talking about all these things. And see, that's all I heard, because that's all I wanted to hear. That's all I heard. I didn't see that pain that's always there when we're trying to share with each other, because that pain comes back. It's needed so that we can talk to that new person. We need to go back to some of that pain and feel again what it's like to be in that trap. And if we ever lose the feeling of that pain, we won't be of any use to anybody. Not another living alcoholic. When I talk to you about what that pain felt like, I need to feel it again. But I didn't look for that. I just heard the words that you said and told me about all this trouble you had been in. I did to you for the next 4 years what my teenagers would do to me in a classroom. I'd bustle in the morning, and open the textbook, and I'd say, now on page 47, we're going to do so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. And I'd be all ready to go, and some old boy way back in the back of the room raised, what page are we on? I'd say, didn't you hear me? Yes, ma'am, I heard you, but I wasn't listening. That's exactly what I did to you for the next 4 years. And honey, if that's what you're doing, please, please, there's a difference between hearing and listening. You know, the sign at the railroad track says, stop and look and listen. Look at the people that are talking and listen to what they have to say. Listen, and you'll hear that pain that alcohol put into their lives, whether it put it in at the very beginning or whether it came into their lives. But listen, that's what I didn't do. I heard you. But you know, I'm firmly convinced of one thing. And darling, please keep coming to these meetings. Please keep coming. Because I am firmly convinced that from the very first meeting I ever went to, God took me by the hand as He's taken you by the hand. And He's going to walk with you the rest of the way. All right, so you might not be the big booming success that walks in and reads on the wall and says, oh, that's what's wrong with me, and accept it 100%. No, you may be just as phony as I was and not be able to listen good enough to realize that your problem is alcohol. Primarily, that problem is alcohol when you walk through those doors. And that's what you need to get out of your life immediately, if not sooner. Immediately. Listen when they tell you that your drinking days are over. I couldn't grasp this. And you kept saying it and saying it. And see, I think the one day at a time was great, but see, I took that. Have you done funny things with that one day at a time business? I mean, this is the way we have to live. I know that now, but I understand it in an entirely different way. I was such a rationalizer. I was such an excuse maker that everything you told me, I could rationalize it. Because we get so good at it. And you're still doing that if you're new. You bring in these habits that alcohol has put into your life, has forced into your life. You bring in those habits, and you can't. Just how to break a bad habit, and notice how long it takes. It doesn't take near that long to break a good habit. Not nearly so long. But you take a nasty old bad habit and try to break it, and you can't do it in 15 minutes. And that's what I wanted. I wanted you people to instantly relieve this life that I was supposedly living. And you didn't do that. You told me it was a lifetime thing. That there was a program that I had to live by if I wanted to have what they had. And this I wasn't going to have any part of. And I fought you. I came to your dumb meeting, but I fought you with everything I had. And every time you tell me something, I had a reason why it didn't apply to Willie. Man told me one time, said, Willie, you know, you're sober, and I'd stay sober for long periods of time. And that wasn't very hard to do. But I'd be sober, you know, and man told me, said, Willie, you still have so many of the old drunk habits. And God, I hated it when he used that word. I hated the word alcoholic, but you know, a drunk lady. This is what I thought I was. I thought, you know, or at least I thought that I was a lady that occasionally got drunk. I didn't realize that I was a drunk that was occasionally a lady. But I would tell you why I had done this, and if, you know, I didn't want it to have anything remotely resembled, you know, the fact that I drank too much. And that alcohol didn't affect me in the same way that it affected all these other people I was living around, including this dummy I'm married to. Because at that time, that's all I could call him, was just a dummy. Because he had so much good advice. And all that time he's standing there drinking his drink. All this good advice. But he said, you know, Willie, you've gotten to be a real good excuse maker. And honey, you give me excuses for everything I try to help you with or tell you. Said you remind me of the fellow that, you know, they jerked out of an old burning building one time, and the police shook him around a little bit and said, George, we have told you not to smoke in bed. He said, hell, the bed was on fire when I got in it. We get good, don't we? Because that's just about as quick as I could come up. If you try to talk to me about 12 steps, I don't need that. I have a master's degree, I would tell you. You know, I've read a lot of books. Don't tell me about a book I need to study. Because I had all these, I was so intelligent, I had to drink a little bit more and go back out there and get a little more stupid, see, before it really happened. But I had excuses, and I would rationalize anything. Breaking a shoelace, I'd rationalize it. I spent a great deal of time rationalizing my behavior. A lot of wasted time, because the men were telling me, Willie, all right, so these things that I would, sit there and announce. I have never been in jail. I've never been in a hospital. Looking down my nose at you. And the man would tell me, Willie, you keep messing with this stuff. And sugar, all those things gonna happen to you. I didn't believe that. So I kept on coming to your meetings because it seemed to relieve the situation at home a little bit better in between times. Because, see, then I could pull my spree drunk. Oh, honey, I'm going back to AA. We get good at that too, don't we? God bless the people that hang with us. And so I gave all the stories. We'd sit in a meeting and I'd tell them, you men, you got it made. Here you come into AA and your pretty little wife, she comes in with you and she has this program and she becomes a good Al-Anon and she changes and becomes this beautiful butterfly and she cooperates with you 100%. She gets all the liquor out of the house because she doesn't care anything about drinking anyhow too much. And she does everything she can for you. And let me tell you about what I got to do when I go home tonight. I got to crawl in bed with a man that's about half in the bag. You don't understand how it is with, somebody that has to live with a drinking man. Because, see, my husband had talked to some of the fellows in AA, and he had asked them, will it help, Willie, if I quit drinking? And those sorry son of a guns there ran to Illinois, told him, no. If she wants to quit drinking bad enough, it won't make any difference. You go right ahead. You enjoy your drinking. But I tell these men, you got it made. And a fellow passed on another little story. And I tell these not to be funny, but hoping that you'll put them in your pocket and carry them with you. He told me another little AA story. He said, Willie, that we had a man one time in AA drove a beer truck. And he went in and out of all these old beer taverns, delivering this beer. And people had asked him, how do you stay sober, and handle this beer all day long and go in these old beer taverns? He said, hell, if I drove a garbage truck, I wouldn't eat the garbage. So that cut down one more excuse for me, see? But I wasn't ready to take. God stuck it in my pocket. Just a simple little story telling me because you're around it, Willie, and because people around you are drinking, and God bless these young people nowadays, everywhere they turn is the finger, If you really want all the gusto out of life, drink. Skiing, picnics, every phase of their life and every phase of fun is there in living color, and the booze is always there. So they're coming up in a world where it's absolutely the in thing to do. And it was for me too. And I said, there's no way that I can stay sober and live around alcohol. But that little story, see, it made an imprint on me. But I kept on with my griping and my belly aching. And I had been sober. I had managed to stay away from alcohol and dry and had no alcohol in my system for about a year. But I was really dry. I was one of these alcoholics, and even members of Alcoholics Anonymous, that you see nowadays. You go into a meeting, and there they sit with their sobriety wrapped around them. And that newcomer will come in the door, and they'll sit there, and they'll say, "You're going to be so happy to be sober." It's such a joyous life. And they look like somebody just hit them in the face with a dead fish. Just sanctimonious, you know. And we all have to watch that, every single solitary one of us. You can't tell them about the joy. You have to let it shine. You have to let it shine. Each one of us has to let it shine. It should be there for them to see. But I was fighting so hard that nothing would come in. But I had been, damn it, dry. And I thought he ought to be more grateful than he was. I was dry a lot of ways that people are dry in AA today, and there are a lot of people that are dry this way. They're dry and they hate every single solitary minute of it. And this is such a shame. Dear God, there is so much joy to be had. But I have been dry for that year, and nothing had happened in my life to change the way that I lived. Nothing had happened with this book. I had taken speed reading by then, so I sped read the book. Evelyn Wood had done a good job. So I had read your book. And it did not, any of it, apply to me. You know, God works real funny in our lives, doesn't He? Especially if we just, even sometime when our motives aren't good, and if you join the meetings, you're doing everything that you can do at this particular time, and this joy that I'm talking about you think is a bunch of bull, it doesn't just happen. We have to do something. But I have been dry that year, and God stepped into my life and gave me the most beautiful gift that He has ever given me besides my sobriety. I had been married 10 years, and God gave me a beautiful baby boy. I took that little boy and we were transferred down to Montgomery, Alabama, and God gave me people. They had been all of the other places I had been, but God, I think, decided that old Willie is now on her knees because I was miserable, even with this beautiful, beautiful baby boy that I had wanted so much and had completely given up on having a child. And I was still sitting there hating every minute of my life because I couldn't drink. It's ridiculous. But that's where I was. And I would, you know, he would come in the afternoons and come off the flight line and he'd fix him up a shaker of martinis or open up a can of beer and he'd sit there and he'd drink it and I could just watch the tiredness just roll off of him. And I would get out my Mary Martyr flag and I would start waving it and I would say, "How can you do this to me?" Now listen at that. I had put this man through pure, unmitigated hell for many years, and I would say to him, "How can you do this to me?" Those people, because you were still those people in Alcoholics Anonymous, tell me that I can't drink, and I can't take a pill, and I get so tired, and I get so nervous here with the baby all day. I don't know anything about babies, and I'm so tired, and I am so nervous. And hell, my man looked at me and he just said, "Hell, be nervous." Now you think about that a minute. Just be nervous. That's the best piece of advice I've ever given. You had been telling me just to be. Now he's lived to regret those words. Because I now have nervous days. I get up and announce in the morning, "This is my nervous day, and I'm going to be nervous all day long." And furthermore, I work real hard making everybody around me as nervous as hell. Anything wrong with being nervous? I never in the history of the medical profession has anybody ever shook to death. By just being plain old nervous. But see, they tell us on the television, you know, we shouldn't be nervous. And doctors, they don't want us to be nervous. That worries doctors. Especially when women go to them and we're nervous. Then they want us to take a pill to help that nervousness. But thank God, my man looked me right straight in the eye and just said, be nervous. And hell, I, went through a period of my life after that I was so nervous I could thread a sewing machine and it's running. But enjoy it. Get some kick out of it. Just know that, all right, this is going to be one of my nervous days. What's wrong with that? Or, the end thing now is that you're not supposed to be depressed. Isn't that the most depressing word you ever heard? Depressed. When one of my girls call me, and tell me, I'm depressed. Hell, it almost makes me depressed. Why can't we just have a bad day? Hell, if you don't have bad days, how do you know when you're having good days? You have been telling me that. So now I just have Dan days. Just plain old tan days. And it's okay. Every day is not going to just come up merry sunshine. It's just not going to do it. And it's all right. There'll be good times. There'll be bad times. But I don't have to poke anything inside my body because you've given me a way to live. You've given me a way to live, and I have to practice that over and over every day. For the first time, I found my beautiful sponsor. I had never bothered with that. That didn't make sense to me. Somebody telling me what to do. And that's what I thought a sponsor was doing, tell me what to do. I didn't know it was the reaching out of one human being and trusting another human being to help them in any way they possibly could. I didn't understand that. So I hadn't bothered to get one of those. But in Montgomery, I asked a beautiful woman named Rose to be my sponsor. And Rose took me by the hand, and she walked with me the rest of the way. The trudging was almost over. But Rose took me to lunch one day, and she said that I was a belly aching about, his drinking and me having to live in that drinking world. And she said, Willie, why don't you get your sense of humor back? I said, you got one, but you've lost it. She said, why do you take yourself so seriously? I said, get taking yourself so seriously. Just stick your old thumb in a bucket of water and pull it out and look at the hole you made. See, the profundity and all the deep things I was looking for is not what got me sober. It was the people giving me the practical ideas. Because I thought about that hole I didn't make all the way home. And I thought about her saying, why don't you get your sense of humor back? Instead of ruining your Sundays, when he goes out, when y'all go out to the club and he drinks and you sit there with this attitude of, I can't drink. Why don't you get your sense of humor back, honey? You're not going to change this man. Because our program tells us we don't have to change people. We don't have to change circumstances. If we'll just work on us. If we just work on what we have and what this program is giving us and work on us, we don't have to change people and we don't have to change circumstances to stay sober and to stay happily sober. And she said, Willie, he's not going to change. So on the way home, I got to thinking, maybe I do need to have a little bit of sense of humor. My husband doesn't like fried eggs. Next time he got a little bit too much, and even these normal drinkers, they get a little bit too much once in a while. And next time he got a little bit too much, I fried his eggs. Just barely. And when I put them down there, I shook them a little bit. Well, see, the one thing those normal drinkers that live with us, they don't want to be one of us. They don't want to have any of the symptoms about, so he'd always sit there and try to eat those suckers. And look like he was enjoying it. And when I say normal drinker, honey, You'll hear, you know, that there really isn't any such thing and all that. But when I say normal, I'm referring to the type of person. Now, this is the type of drinker he is. He can come in from work and he can say, okay, I'm going to have 3 beers and I'd like to eat about 7:30. Or I'm going to have 3 or 4 drinks and I'm going to eat at 7:30. All right. Now, he sits there and reads his paper and he sippy. And it's 7:30. Boom, when that clock goes off at 7:30, here he comes. And he'll have that much of a drink or that much beer left in a glass, and he will walk to my sink, and he will pour it out. And I'll watch it go all... I cry a lot at my house. That's repulsive. To pour out that drink. But it's 7:30 and the fool wants to eat. All right, he eats his supper and you know, then he wants a piece of pie or a bowl of ice cream. It's ridiculous. And then he goes to bed. And he goes to sleep. And he stays there in that bed. I don't hear kitchen cabinets rattling in, 3 o'clock in the morning. Doors quietly closing, and things like that. No. He stays there. He sleeps all night. He gets up the next morning, and he goes to work. This is what I was living with.
Oh, Lord.
So about bong went the bell. And, I got to thinking, hell, I can't stop his drinking, but my God, I can stir it up a little bit. And my boy was up to the age, he came in one day and he said, Mama, Ricky has a pet and I sure would like to have one. And boy, I was a good mother. And I said, yeah, honey, what would you like to have? I meant what kind of a dog or what kind of a cat, because I thought that's what he was saying. He said, no, Mama, Ricky has a snake. And the old wheels started turning. As y'all know, I'm a country girl. And I married a city boy. And he's scared spitless of snakes. And I'm not. So I said, fine, honey, but let's wait till Saturday to go get it. Because we had a party coming up at the Officers Club Saturday night. So Saturday afternoon, we went to the pet store and we got a long black king snake. We named him Jack on the way home. And I told my boy, I said, honey, let's don't bother Dad showing him Jack tonight. There's babysitter's coming. And I said, let's just don't bother Dad with it. Go ahead and take it into your room, little glass cage. We'll show it to him tomorrow. And, I helped that dude get drunk that night. Every time that glass would go down a little bit, I'd fill it up. This man needs a drink here. And he was zonked when he got home. The next morning, I went in and got old Jack out of his little glass cage. I took him in there and I opened that bedroom door, put old Jack in there and closed the door. Now, you young people sitting out there, y'all think you invented freaking? You didn't. You never saw a human being depart a room quite so rapidly. My husband's a quiet man. He doesn't like noise. My little boy loved those little mini bikes when they first came out. I bought him one. And he took good care of it, was careful on it, so I bought him the next size, and I bought him the next size, and he got up to that 350 Honda. And he had let me ride it, and God, it was fun. So I went out and bought me one. And Jeff and I'd get our 2 motorcycles. And on a Sunday morning, when I knew he didn't feel so good, but trying so hard to look like he did. But, like I say, even these normal drinkers, they get headaches. I mean, they're the ones that get headaches. And they get queasy feelings in their stomach and things like this. And old Jeff and I'll get out there in the garage, and I'll tell him, let's don't back them out. Let's rev them up here in the house. And our garage is attached to the house, and you talk about, he's got a great big Harley now. We get out there and rev up those things, button, 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 and the whole house vibrates, including his head. But see, you told me that man still drinks. Lots he drinks. The fool isn't an alcoholic, because he couldn't do stuff like that, could he? Pour that down. And eat. All the time the man wants to eat on schedule. No, I'm afraid he'll never be one of us. That's his hard luck. But see, it doesn't have to make me unhappy. Not for one splitting minute. Circumstances and people. I changed my attitude. Rose gave me a key. Darling, don't look for big, monstrous solutions. That's not what this program is all about. Latch on to you listen to the people that are giving you the most beautiful gift you'll ever have in your life. And that's sobriety. They're giving it to you. And my God, it's a beautiful way to live. This is it. Don't keep waiting for life to get here. It's here. Make every single day. Sure, it might not be just the day that you want, but that's all right. If you get through it sober, and you try to think, like the people in AA tell you to think. Think positive. And know that the next day is going to be okay. And know that you can take people and circumstances the way they are. And you can take people in your lives and wish them well. We don't have to hate anymore. I don't have to hate. I don't have to envy. I don't have to resent anybody anymore. Because, see, none of those feelings are positive. And you told me that I can build a life. A beautiful, beautiful life. And there's so few requirements to that. You asked me to give it away. And dear God, I'll try to do that. Because you guaranteed me that if I give it away, I can keep it. And you've asked me, be here when the newcomer comes. Come to meetings. Give what God has given you so freely. That's all you ask. And that's all they're asking of you, darling. And they're offering you the world on a platter. A world that you've never even known. Because even all those so-called not normal days that I had before I got mixed up with alcohol, they won't compare with what I have now. You're a part of that, each one of you. I wouldn't have you. These beautiful friends that I have, I see maybe once every 4, 5, 6 years. Dear God, I can look in their eyes and know the gift that this program has given me. Because you see, they love me, warts and all. They love me for just what I am. Just what I can be in a splitting second. I can go back to being a drunk. And they know that. And they love me so much that I'm not likely to do that today. AA is offering you, darling, a way to live. The most beautiful way in the world. The happiest way in the world. Sure, they're going to be bad times. That's all right. That's okay. You don't think in 26 years that nothing has happened to me? Of course it has. Of course it has. But not one problem in 26 years has ever been so intense that I had to turn any place except to this program and to you. I don't know what AA is. I have no idea. But I want to close with a little article that I found in the grapevine. It was published in about 56, 57, 58, in through there. And it's the most, to me, it says so much, and it'll say so much to each one of us as individuals in this program. AA is a spirit. It cannot be touched, nor can it be completely understood. It's as wide as the world, and yet snug enough to fit into the hearts and the minds of man. It's brought light where only darkness dwelt. It's given hope to the hopeless, and help to those who yearned in despair. It's given strength to the weak, and humility to the strong. It's nourished forgiveness in those who knew no pity. It's taught patience to the hurried, and action to the lazy. To youth, it's given vision, and to the aged, promise. To the lonely, companions, and to the restless, rest. To the sick, it's been a doctor, and to the dying, it has revived the desire to live. It has no judgment against the unteachable, nor has it praise for those who learn. To the outcast, it's been a family, and to the childless, it has given children. To the ignorant, wisdom, and to the wise, tolerance. It's given to all men that which is most precious. It's given the love of truth, with enough left over to share with each other. God bless.